Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's Cloudamize and Astadia webinar featuring Cloud Readiness Assessment and Migration Planning. During the presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to type it into your chat box on your control panel. We're going to save the questions till the end. We have a great presentation for you today, so let's get started. Steve, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Desiree. We'll start today with introductions. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. My name is Steve Lack. I am Vice President of Cloud Solutions here at Stadia, and we're happy to have joining us today Adi Rao, who is a solution evangelist from Cloudamize. So today we're going to talk about, of course, I have to do a little Stadia commercial and Cloudamize commercial at the start. We'll keep that brief. Talk a bit about growth in the cloud market and something that's become known as the boomerang. We'll talk about what do you need to assess, really, what are you looking at when looking to migrate applications to the cloud. The star of the show is the Cloudamize platform and how that helps our Stadia consultants work with you to better migrate your workloads to the cloud. How do you interpret the data that you get from it? Where do you go from here? What are your next steps? And at the end of the presentation, we'll have a special offer for those folks who are attending, as well as a Q&A session at the end. And as Desiree mentioned, please use the chat box in your console for questions. So first off, who's Stadia? We are a premier technology consultancy. We are focused on maximizing the impact and minimizing your risk of what we call today's blended enterprise and cloud ecosystem. We do believe while many things are moving to the cloud, there are some things that will stay, and that also needs to be part of what your ecosystem is and need to be taken into account when you look at your infrastructure going forward. People choose us. Oh, sorry, this thing is jumping quickly. For our experience, we've been in this business for a very long time, 25 years of managing platform change for our clients. We have built Stadia to be nimble. We are very agile. You find us very easy to work with, and for us, results matter. We want to make sure that we're delivering impactful, measurable results to our clients and making sure that we have happy, referenceable clients. You're going to hear a lot about Cloudamize today. And so the Cloudamize platform is just a fantastic analytics platform that allows Stadia consultants to make better, faster decisions on what and when to move to the cloud. Once your applications have moved, it also helps us to optimize your configurations and save on your cloud spend. As you all know, the cloud market is expected to grow from $19 billion last year in 2016 to over $122 billion in 2020 at an astounding 61% annual growth rate. It is a veritable gold rush out there. Trying to take advantages of cloud computing, such as pay-as-you-go, scalability, elasticity, and all those good things that come with cloud computing. But with that staggering growth going on, it makes sense that there's also an increase in reliance on managed service organizations as well to help get these workloads to the cloud and manage them and make sure that all your security requirements are being met. This, of course, leaves IT managers in a quandary. Only 9% of enterprises say their data centers are optimized. 60% admit that their platform strategy is one of the most challenging decisions. With a mandate from the company, whether it's the CEO, the CIO, to just move to the cloud, a lot of folks are struggling out there with what makes sense to move and, frankly, what doesn't. Is there a real return on investment here? Can I be certain when I'm making a TCO pitch to management that I'm telling them what's accurate? There's also something called the Boomerang Effect that we're seeing out there, and this came from a DataLink IDG survey. And really, as you can see, nearly 40% of organizations with public cloud experience report having moved public cloud workloads back to on-premises. This underscores the importance of really understanding your workload requirements prior to making platform decisions to avoid risk. How can you be sure that what you're moving actually makes sense to move and your company's really going to see the benefits? So how do you know that you're approaching this the right way? What exactly do you need to look at? Well, first and foremost is the actual environment, which will show you the best and most expedient way to handle. In addition to that, there are many, many other things that are going to need to address, that you'll need to address during your analysis. For example, the impact on existing business, your current environment, your business processes. You know, we'll get to those and talk about those in a little more detail later on in the session. So I'm sure many of you have been through this before when you were looking at other ways to do things. I mean, really, prior to being able to automate this process, there's just an endless string of questions, spreadsheets, and interviews. A lot of people from various groups throughout your company would need to be interviewed. Typically, there were diverging opinions on which applications are where, which are talking to each other, what are the compute and storage requirements for each, and more importantly, do we have any rogue devices or shadow IT out there that we're not even aware of? And in most cases, absolutely. Well, starting with an incomplete CMDB, pivot tables, old Visio diagrams, and long interviews, this was really an interminable process. So I'm going to turn this over to Adi and have him discuss how Astadia and Cloudamize can make this process much simpler and faster, and dare I say, relatively painless.
Thanks, Steve. And again, my name is Adi Rao. My role here is to basically enable our partners and evangelize the Cloudamize platform. So I'll go over a little bit what we do here and how Astadia can leverage that within their service offerings. And we'll start, kind of at the beginning with the challenges we see in the cloud journey that we try to solve. First, obviously, which cloud is right for me? How much will it cost? Right? There's a lot of differences between the different vendors, whether it's Amazon or Azure or Google or what have you. And getting getting an idea of all of their offerings and trying to find that right solution for your workloads and your environment can be a challenge. So that's something we want to address. From there, like which applications should you move, what order should you move them, and what are all the applications we have and how are they connected? And getting back to what Steve was saying, there can be a lot of things in the environment out there that people don't know about, or it can be a challenge to discover. And then, what configuration is best? How do you know that you're going to get that optimal performance at the lowest possible cost, right? And ultimately, after you move or as you move, you want to plan for capacity as well, and do it, in tandem with what your business drivers are. And those are some of the challenges that we're trying to solve with our platform, right? And it's a infrastructure analytics platform, and we try to take care of the entire cloud journey. And again, find that best fit configuration and the best fit vendor, automate that discovery, the dependency mapping to ease the migration, and then ultimately provide some ongoing performance analysis, making sure your things are sized appropriately on an ongoing basis, planning for capacity, things of that nature, so that our clients and our partners have very clear visibility into what's being spent, how it's being spent, that sort of thing. And as far as the cloud journey itself, we see it in 5 phases, right? Assess, plan, migrate, validate, and manage. And we start in the beginning with our initial assessment and initial assess dashboard. And what we do here is collect system-level data from the environment and use that to project the workloads into Amazon, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, any combination of those three. And we actually benchmark all of the cloud offerings. Right? There aren't any publicly available benchmarks for the cloud, so it can be very difficult to project performance. But because we do that internally here, it allows us to very accurately project performance, which, again, is going to give you that best fit configuration. And in addition to doing so, will help you realize kind of very precise TCO of what things will look like once it has been migrated. From there, as those business cases are built, you actually have to plan out what that migration is. How many VMs are out there, right? What applications are living on which machines? How do they depend on each other? What ports do they communicate on? These are all the things that need to be discovered, and that's something that our platform can automate. And ultimately, beyond that, it's a large volume of information, and the platform allows you to parse that information very quickly and build logical move groups, and ultimately prioritize those move groups so you can build that roadmap to the cloud. From there, obviously, those workloads need to be migrated. So what we do, there are a lot of migration vendors out there. The best is really Cloud Indoor. They do block level replication. They can move anything, anywhere, and and for us, it makes a lot of sense to integrate with them as they're very much the best of breed. And essentially, what will happen is that the planning data that is within the Cloudamize platform that the Stadia consultants will create can easily be fed into the Cloud Indoor solution so that you can then replicate those workloads in the cloud. From there, as those things move, it's important to come back and validate the migration. Right? We want to compare the new state to the historical state, make sure everything is sitting on the infrastructure according to the plan, and ultimately make sure that the applications are communicating as they should, that the security groups are built out as they should be, so you can sort of give a thumbs up to that phase of the migration and move on to phase 2, or ultimately move into ongoing management. And the platform allows you to do that as well, at least just for the infrastructure side, where we can size things appropriately. Again, it's important to do that initially, but ultimately, prices are going to change. There's going to be new offerings introduced, and it's critical to make sure that you're utilizing the appropriate resources for the capacity that you need. And ultimately, you want to be able to filter out that billing data. If anybody on the call is familiar with a cloud bill, you're looking at kind of massive spreadsheets where it's like, hey, you owe me $3 for this disk and $5 for that, and it can be hard to analyze that data and build out reports to see who exactly is using what, and the platform can allow us to do that as well. So that's our goal here, right? That's how we see the cloud journey, and we want our analytics platform to be able to support our partners who are architects, and they have cloud expertise, and they can fill in the gaps around what we do from a data and analytics standpoint. So key value drivers by leveraging Cloudamize along with Stadia is that, again, you're getting that optimal cloud environment. You're able to control costs and lower costs, move kind of more from a capital expense to more OpEx type environments, and those decisions can happen very quickly, right? It's very much a data-driven process, and those decisions can be made quickly and ultimately accelerate the time to that cloud value. This is some of the companies we've worked with here, and again, just getting back to some of the key value drivers. from a number standpoint, anywhere from 65, 75, 80% reduction in migration planning cycles, and then average cost savings can be, up to 48%. And again, that's by both sizing things appropriately early on, as well as managing that appropriately on an ongoing basis. Now, as far as how it works, this is kind of a high-level overview here of our analytics engine. To the top left, you'll see, VMware, Hyper-V, on-prem, and cloud. That's going to represent, the raw kind of system and application level data that we collect, and then we combine that with the libraries that we've built and maintain over time. So one of those is a public benchmarking library. This way we can get an understanding of what type of equipment that you have out there today and how your workloads are performing on that equipment. Then we have our internal Cloudamize benchmarks, right? And that's getting back to what I said earlier. We actually benchmark all the cloud offerings internally. It allows us to, and by being able to see, how the workloads are performing today, how they'll perform in the cloud, and introducing some performance thresholds, you'll be able to size things appropriately. Beyond that, the platform also has an application library. It's up to 20 or 25,000 applications at this point. We're able to identify a lot, every off-the-shelf application that's out in these environments, and also flag, proprietary and specialized applications, the types of things that might need to be rewritten or refactored before they're even suitable for the public cloud. From there, we'll normalize everything around price, performance, readiness, and suitability. The architects at Stadia will be able to come in and run what-if scenarios based on their understanding of your business drivers. And then ultimately, all the options within the public cloud get fed into the engine as well. And the results are presented through the SaaS portal. And obviously, like the Stadia folks will be able to export that and generate reports that will make it easy for you to understand what the plan is, what the costs are going to look like, and how, what the timeline will be to get there. At this point, I'll jump over to a demo. I'll do a quick demo of the platform here, and then pass the mic back to Steve. So this is the SS dashboard. This is the initial area when we launch into the results. And again, the idea here is that we want to project cost and performance into all three public clouds. So we'll start here briefly with Amazon Web Services, and you'll see, first thing obviously is the annual cost, and we'll break that down into the compute, storage, and network costs between physical and virtual machines. Underneath the AWS logo here, you'll see we're currently in hardware on demand. So on demand is month-to-month pricing in Amazon, and there are many pricing plans across the various public clouds. And what we're doing here is hardware mapping. So this is just like a like-for-like mapping, and it's really more how people traditionally approach trying to provision workloads in the cloud. But ultimately, it's really not the right approach. What we want to do is optimize on cost and performance and leverage the fact that things can run more efficiently in the cloud. Right? So underneath here is workload mapping, and this is where we'll actually size things appropriately. Again, getting back to the benchmarking, the performance thresholds, we want to make sure that we can recommend a configuration that will allow for the required performance at the lowest possible cost. And so those two views are available really across all three clouds. But from there, some of the data can change based on the inherent differences in the platforms themselves. So for example, here in AWS, we will show what it would look like from a cost perspective if you were to do an all-upfront 3-year payment, right, or an all-upfront 1-year payment, for example. On the Microsoft side, we will show the 12-month prepay option, things of that nature. So, you're able to see kind of best case scenario, worst case scenario, and get a real balanced understanding of what costs could look like. From there, we can predict, we'll show both the observed and predicted behavior for every single machine that we analyze. Right? So, and for example, here, on the compute side, you're able to see the OS and the version on each machine. What instance type are we recommending? And there's dozens and dozens of types. So we'll actually recommend one, and then we'll tell you why we're recommending that via the bottleneck. Right? There's always going to be a reason that we're not going to go smaller. So we'll show that there. We'll even show not just observed uptime, but also we'll do some usage pattern analysis and make recommendations on what that could look like. And again, based on what the Stadia architects know about your business, they could come in and say, hey, a lot of this stuff we might be able to turn off on nights or weekends or both and get even greater cost savings. Right? And from there, we'll show, again, observed and predicted behavior. Here we have an 8-core machine running at 28% peak CPU on-prem. We're recommending scaling down to a 4-core machine that'll run at 29% peak CPU. Our target is 60%, but it'd be nice to get closer. In this case, we can't get any closer because we don't have enough disks to support the storage. Right? Similarly, on storage side, we'll make a recommendation on what type of storage that we need to purchase. Again, that'll optimize cost and performance, but ultimately we'll also show data for all of the other available options as well, so that again, if you're planning for capacity or you want to plan for some load growth, that data, the observed and predicted data, will be here as well. And it is possible to drill down to even greater detail, either to understand and justify our recommendation or make changes based on usage pattern analysis. So here, for instance, you're able to see CPU usage over time, both observed and predicted. And if need be, these Stadia architects will be able to drill down, in 5-minute intervals, 1-minute intervals, and see the performance exactly as it happens when we were collecting data, so they can provision appropriately. And in addition to CPU, we're also able to see memory and network bit rate over time, occupancy, IOPS, throughput, operation sizes for all the disks. And again, like for, say, you're on Amazon side, we can show, there are a lot of offerings that involve credits and tokens and things of that nature that can be leveraged very efficiently, but you need to have a clear understanding of what those resources look like. We'll be able to show that as well. So that should give you some idea of what the granularity is here and how precise this platform can be. And beyond that, what the Stadia team can do is come in and even tune even more specifically, right? They can come in and, based on your needs, move things to different regions, change different pricing plans, change some of the performance thresholds and instance types, again, aligning with your business drivers so that you get a very specific design that's tailored to what your needs are there. And again, this is just kind of to help build that business case. But ultimately, from there, you need to actually come in and plan that migration, right? And this is where most teams get bogged down, right? It's trying to find what's out there in the environment and how things communicate. So what we will do is actually lay out a topology view of the environment so that you can visualize what's out there. And you'll see that to the left here. You'll see all of the kind of groups and assets and machines. And to the right, you'll see all of the applications in this environment. And what we're able to do is very quickly come in and show, hey, I want to move my SQL server to Azure or Amazon. Like, what would that look? How would I do that? Right? Well, if you search for that application, what we can do is come in and start mapping out dependencies so that hey, if I start picking up application X or application Y, how does it depend on everything else in the environment? Like, how do I know I'm not going to break it by trying to move it? How do I know I won't affect some other application in an adverse way? right? So what we'll do here is map that out so that you're able to see very clearly, what needs to be moved. And beyond that, we provide a great deal of detail into each specific dependency. So we can show, what the client and IP names are, what the specific processes are. In this case, we have read portal services communicating with SQL Server. Get down into the details of specific executable names, vendor information, the types of things that, solutions architects need to be able to design a solution and, again, be very precise. Right? And as you build these groups, well, earlier we gave an idea of what costs could look like, at a high level for all machines. Here, we can also, as logical groups are created, give an idea of, hey, what's my price going to look like if I just move this, right? And is that based on a design that came right out of Cloudamize, or is it something that was customized by the services organization, right? In addition, we can also automate the discovery of all the port information, right? So inbound rules, outbound rules, UDP. It used to be traditionally kind of gathering all of this data could take weeks and weeks, and ultimately, you have to put all of those in spreadsheets. You have to try and visualize them in Visio. How do you kind of create pivot tables and redraw things kind of very kind of tedious, cumbersome, unwieldy process, right? And what we've tried to do here with the platform is provide a planning tool that will allow cloud architects to move much faster. So there are a lot of reports available here and a lot of granular data, and it's really about analyzing these dependencies, building logical groups, and then reconciling any other dependencies, right? And there's several ways to do so. You can move things that are interconnected and create new groups and new assets. For example, if I'm here, now you see your SQL cluster all in one place, and it's very easy to see, what's your cost to move that group of machines. And, again, you have your port information, so you can start building out your security groups and subnets and things of that nature. And there are ways to, that's one way to see things by application, and there are several ways is able to filter by machine and do key value pairs and a lot of different things. We can even just filter in a very advanced way and show, for example, the Stadia team can come in here and just say, hey, can I build a group based on any metric that's available? The answer is yes, right? We can come in and create filters based on what the bottlenecks are for the organization, what uptime looks like. Maybe there are machines that can be turned off on nights and weekends. Really any metric we collect, the platform will allow you to create filters on and build groups by. Okay? So it's a very powerful platform that will allow you to build out these logical groups and then reconcile those dependencies so you can confidently move that to the public cloud. Now, the nice thing is, we can even show any shadow IT that's in that environment, right? So even if we're not monitoring certain machines, we'll be able to come in and show connectivity going back to machines or applications that people aren't familiar with, right? So in this case, you'll see these red dots here, red boxes, and those are going to be the machines that are out of scope of the project, or potentially the people thought were out of scope, but now you're realizing, hey, there's critical dependencies going out to these areas of the environment we're unfamiliar with, and we're really going to have to reconcile that before we start picking things up and moving them, because otherwise you will break things, right? And it'll be, there's not as much trial and error here. We're being very precise, and the platform will allow you to reduce the number of assumptions you're making before you try and move something to the cloud. This way you can be very certain of exactly what's happening and reconcile everything as you start to migrate to the public cloud. And then again, as these groups are built out within the platform, it makes it very easy we can push that out to Cloud Endure, right? And essentially come in, choose which design you want to create in the cloud, choose which groups you want to actually migrate, and then from there, the data that needs to be passed to the migration tools will be populated, and there'll be tight integration, right? What we can do is actually have our platform communicate with the replication platform. The information passes over via API, and you can do that right from here. Again, eliminating a lot of manual processes.
And just to jump in, Adi, so Cloud Endure is another strategic partner of Astadia. And for those listening in, we'll be doing a webinar with Cloud Endure sometime towards the end of April. So keep your eye on your emails for that. Thanks, Adi.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, so hopefully this gives you an idea of what that looks like, of what the complexity is in creating these types of plans, the importance of having partners who are, really leveraging best-of-breed technology in order to, not just evaluate your environment, but actually plan out these migrations and do it in a way where you're confident, that these plans will be executed as needed. And the nice thing is that you can have multiple plans happening here. There can be multiple people managing various parts of the project. Again, adding out tags and key value pairs, choosing different types of migrations, whether that is going to be just normal lift and shift, or if you would perhaps consider PaaS solutions, things of that nature. The platform will allow you to really kind of separate out pieces of the environment and prioritize that as needed, right? And you're able to make changes globally and have several different designs here at once. And that's the idea here with the migration planning module. Again, this gets fed into Cloud Endure, and that's the webinar that Steve spoke about earlier, and we'll be able to showcase that there. And then ultimately, as those workloads are replicated in the cloud, we can continue monitoring from there, come back to a view like this, and just validate that everything is communicating appropriately, and ultimately move into the ongoing management. Those areas I'm not going to touch on so much today. In all likelihood, we'll be doing additional webinars and series in that regard. But I did want to, the reason we did have this short demo here is because it was relevant, again, to what we're discussing for the webinar, and as well to just give you a flavor of the tools that can be leveraged by the Stadia team to build out the plans for your company.
That's a great point, too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Adi. That's a great point, too. And so we will be following this up with another session later on post-migration managed services and the value that that Cloudamize brings to that as well, which you did touch on here today, and we'll certainly have another further session on that and the value that Cloudamize brings post-migration.
Awesome, great. So at this point, I'll turn it back over to you, Steve. And I know there's a couple of other things that you wanted to speak about. And then we can move into Q&A here towards the end.
Awesome.
Towards the end of the hour.
Yep. Oh. Right. So thanks, Adi. Phenomenal job. And, as everybody's just seen, using the Cloudamize platform along with an Astadia consultant shows you how you can really rapidly build a business case for migrating workloads to the cloud. You can certainly understand server, network, storage, database requirements, and dependencies, as well as the cost for running these workloads on multiple cloud providers. Pretty phenomenal. But there's still some items that you're going to need to address as you build out your migration scenarios. You're going to have to understand, what are the security requirements for the workloads? How does things like identity management, for example, need to factor in? And how do they link with your on-premise solutions? Another big one, what are the license impacts if those are coming into play? For example, moving from, say, Oracle, where you're paying for licenses, to maybe going to a service such as, Amazon Aurora or something like that, which is a completely different licensing model. So how much money can you save there is also going to come into play in these scenarios and in this type of engagement. Also, how does this impact your business, by moving certain workloads to the cloud? Can you have a direct impact on other costs? Can you increase revenue by taking advantage of Agile and DevOps practices to get to market faster? For example, better user experience. We've talked about better utilization of your assets and infrastructure and making sure that your workloads are optimized. And the other thing that you need to look at is, how ready is your business for this? How ready are they to handle the new way of doing things? Are there internal politics? People don't like to admit it, but that can often get in the way of things running smoothly. I'm sure nobody on this call has those issues, but we've seen them in the past. There's still people in the organization that have security concerns about putting anything, in the cloud. Do you have folks who are resistant to any kind of change, or are just simply not ready to learn a new way of looking at things? So these are the kind of things that will typically come out in engagement like this too, and certainly need to be addressed if you want to be successful. And lastly, how will your current business processes and workflows be affected by this move, particularly things like procurement? We'll need to understand the nature of spinning up resources for limited periods of time. How do you pay for those? Continuous optimization, or things like spot instances, which are priced via bidding process. What is your current management monitoring process, and how does that change by moving things to the cloud? Have you already employed automation orchestration into your current ITSM processes, and how will those come into play in this new environment? And even things like departmental chargebacks that were mentioned by Adi earlier, and how can those be handled? There's a lot of other things that need to come into play as you're evaluating your move to the cloud, and certainly many ways that Astadia can help you get there. Just as an aside, an enhancement, I guess, on something else I had talked about earlier, with this 60 to 85% time savings. When you look at really a timeline of an engagement like this and moving 25 nodes to the cloud from the very beginning stages of getting buy-in to discovery, we found that we can effectively help our clients get there 2.5 times faster than in the traditional fully manual process. And just a lot of that time is saved when you look at how much time it takes to collect the data, building the migration plan, and actually looking at the cloud readiness. So it's just a phenomenal time saver. You eliminate the possibility of human error in a lot of cases, and have some real data to bring to management for a real TCO and essentially a return on investment argument and discussion. So with that said, we'd like to offer a cloud readiness assessment for those folks who are on the call. Typically, something like this, we come in and do up to 25 nodes or servers, everything that you've seen from the Cloudamize platform. Discover your infrastructure, map the dependencies, build your move groups, help you identify cloud configurations, the optimal one for each workload, and give you that price comparison between AWS, Azure, and Google. And typically, we'll charge about $18,000 for this for attendees of this webinar. We're offering a $99.95 price for that, certainly plus any travel if required. So if you are interested in taking us up on this, and I hope you will be, send a mail to info@astadia.com to claim the offer. So with that, I want to say thank you for joining us. We're going to turn it over to Desiree now for any Q&A. So take it away, Desiree.
Wonderful. Thanks, Steve. So we have been getting some questions coming through. First one, will you be able to tell me if a workload does not make sense to move to the cloud? Steve,
absolutely. Yeah. I will take that, and thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I think we tried to address that earlier as you saw the whole boomerang effect, that you need to make sure that what you're moving makes sense to move, and that not all workloads make sense to move. You know, an application with static usage on a solid server probably doesn't have an ROI attached to it, or you know, if something is similarly running 7 by 24 by 365 on a relatively recent piece of hardware, sometimes the math doesn't work. So there are absolutely times to move workloads, many times, and there are certainly times that doesn't make sense, and our job is to let you know which is which.
All right. Next question. With the constant changes in cloud pricing, how do we know your pricing is accurate? Adi, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, sure thing. So, you know, the pricing will be reflected via the platform. Now, we're partners with AWS. We have advanced migration competency with Amazon. We're partners with Microsoft as well, quickly kind of becoming their preferred tool of choice. Their kind of consulting services, center of excellence teams leverage Cloudamize as well. And then we are a preferred platform of Google as well. So as part of those partnerships, in order to maintain the accuracy of the platform, you know, we do have pricing APIs with all three vendors. We might even potentially add Oracle Cloud later this year, and it would function the same way there. But yeah, as prices are updated and made publicly available, they are reflected in our platform via API, and we update those daily. So you can always be certain, not just the prices are correct, but you know, like there are a lot of different regions where you can host within the cloud, right? And the offerings within those regions can vary. I know we were looking at Azure earlier. You know, there may be certain areas where, you know, premium storage is available and other areas where it is not. There are certain offerings are available here and it's not, you know, in the eastern region, but not in Canada or what have you. So beyond just updating pricing, the platform will also update the regions that are available and the offerings within those regions, and that is all updated regularly as well. And even when there are new offerings, we will benchmark those and get them within the platform. That can take a bit longer, but really it's just a couple of weeks in order for us to do that before we can kind of confidently project performance. But yeah, we absolutely stay up to date on the latest and greatest within the cloud, so that you can be certain that, you know, you're not missing out on anything when you know, the Stadia team is leveraging the tool set to make recommendations for your company.
All right. Another interesting question just came in. Can most applications move as is, or do they need to be refactored in some way? Steve, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. So many existing applications can be moved as is, you know, with certainly minor modifications that are typically related to infrastructure, you know, security groups, elasticity, those kinds of things. What we typically try to do is lift and shift for most Windows Linux applications, and look for optimization opportunities afterwards to take advantage of some of the new cloud services that are offered. There are, however, certain applications due to the way they're written that's simply not cloud ready and will need to be adjusted before moving to the cloud due to things like, older operating systems that are not supported on clouds like Solaris or something like that, or something that an older application may have something as simple as a call to drive C or something. So, Stadia does have the capability of dealing with these issues, and certainly if folks have those, we'd love to discuss them with you.
All right, great answer. This next question seems to be our last one. So it reads, what other factors come into play in monitoring a cloud environment other than cost optimization? Steve, would you like to answer this one?
Sure. Yeah, that's also a really good question. I think Adi did a great job, too, of talking about how the Cloudamize platform helps with optimization as far as not only as far as instance sizes and taking advantage of new offerings that come from the cloud providers, but also the just tremendous advantage and help in being able to rationalize, let's call it, cloud provider invoices and be able to look at chargebacks and departmental chargebacks and things like that. But also, a lot of the same issues that affect on-premise infrastructure applies to monitoring the cloud too. When you think of infrastructure as a service, the customer is still responsible for making sure that the VM is running and not exceeding thresholds, things like CPU, memory utilization. You're still responsible for patching the operating system, monitoring the applications, and maintaining security. So those things are still going to come into play in addition to monitoring your cost data and optimization. And then there is an awful lot of things like automation and orchestration, which we'll cover in our webinar on cloud management and monitoring that will come into play from a managed service organization as well.
All right, great. We actually have an additional question that just popped through. It reads, can you speak a bit to the security concerns that stakeholders definitely raise? Who would like to tee this one up?
Sure. I'm assuming that's talking about putting an agent on a machine. So I'm going to let Adi address that. And then if that was not the question that was asked, if you could follow it up with an email, we'd be happy to address it.
Yeah, so there's, thanks, Steve. So there's a couple of ways that could be directed, right? One is obviously like on leveraging Cloudamize itself. And in that regard, our software, we do need to install Cloudamize discovery tools and agents in the environment, so we can actually discover, what's out there, look at the usage patterns so that we can do our analysis. From that standpoint, we do have kind of agent-based data collection. We can do things agentless. Again, depending on the scope of the project and the type of the environment, we may have, there is some flex there. Beyond that, what we do is essentially we collect that data, and it is really high fidelity data. It collects every 30 seconds and pushes out to our servers every 5 minutes. Now, we do host our production workloads in the cloud. So what will happen is the data will travel out, and that can be over TLS or SSL or whatever you guys leverage. It basically communicates out on 443, or ultimately everything can be routed by a corporate proxy as well. So in that way, the data will always be encrypted in flight, and then we encrypt the data at rest as well, and the standard there is AES 256. And then we'll collect for a couple of weeks and then deliver our results. There aren't any reboots required. There are no inbound firewall rules to open. The data only travels out. And at any time, you can stop data collection via the portal or with a request. And then, like we will generally archive and delete the data after 90 days once the engagement is completed, and it can be done again right away upon request. So that's a little bit on, kind of how we collect data and the security there. And then obviously, if it's more on security concerns of moving workloads into the cloud themselves, that's getting back to a little bit what Steve was saying. It's very much kind of a shared responsibility model, right? Amazon and Google and stuff are going to have their kind of physical security and redundancy at the kind of core infrastructure level with, the armed guards and the biometric locks and all that kind of thing. But ultimately, it's the responsibility of the users to make sure that that the ports are secure and things are communicating as they should. And again, that's not something the platform provides. There's a lot of value in the data, right? But then that's where Astadia consultants can come in and say, okay, now that we very accurately captured all this port information, let's go start building up security groups and things of that nature.
Excellent point, and I'll also add on top of that that we have a tremendous offering around managed security services in a cloud environment as well, which we'll certainly talk about at a later date. So thanks, Adi.
All right, wonderful. Well, wonderful. Thank you, Steve and Adi. This concludes today's webinar. We appreciate you joining us today to learn more about cloud readiness and migration, and we look forward to you joining us again in the future. So thank you for joining, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.